Just a moment.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Okay, so let me start. I prepared some slides to share our Korean government 6G R&D strategy. So my computer a little bit slow. Just a moment. Okay, can you see?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So today I will share what is the Korean 6G planning. So firstly, I want to share Korean 5G success story. And after that, I want to share 6G technology directions and schedule. After that, I want to share Korean government announced the vision strategy for 6G and action plans and implementation system. I have a few slides, but I wanted to make it very short. So everybody knows Korean successful 5G commercialization is a world first. That was started 2013 from Korean 5G project. It was very earliest schedule. So after that, we could have very successful R&D result that take around 4 or 5 years. And while we are doing the R&D, we also working for the frequency standard in ITU. And that was 2013, we proposed a new spectrum band for our 5G. So after that, we had ITU meetings and WRC 15, and after that, WRC 19, we could standardize the new spectrum band for 5G on millimeter wave band. And from 2000, actually 15, we could start the standard in 3PP as a technical standard. That takes around 4 years to make first finalized 5G standard. It was 2018. It took a long time, but every engineers actively joined the standard effort. And finally, we could have very nice 5G standard. In Korea, 2018, everybody remember Pyeongchang Olympic, Korean government announced the plan for the 5G commercialization goal. After that, we could have first launch it, the world first 5G wave. After that, 2 years ago, already 2 years ago, 2019, April, successfully 5G commercialization has been done. While we are doing that, all efforts, global collaboration was very critical, very important. So in Korea, we have 5G forum to collaborate multiple countries for 5G standard and R&D. And especially for the spectrum band, 28 gigahertz initiative, initial international workshop has been done based on the collaboration between Korean government and American government. So let me start with the 6G technical direction with this slide. Everybody remember what we have done for first generation till fifth generation. As you know, first and second generation was for mainly voice services. Second generation was very successful to spread the voice service over a global way. And third generation introduced data service, mobile data service, but actually LTE, first generation has successfully spread out the mobile data service in global way. And fifth generation introduced new service as a vertical service. It just started, but I believe sixth generation will make a vertical service very successfully to provide technical edge. So that is the role of the 6G, I believe. So for service development, actually 5G fifth generation already introduced a lot of good B2B and vertical services as a new. 6G generation will improve those services, but actually 6G generation will make services introduced by 5G will be successful in the real market. So before we go to the real technical requirement for 6G, we should start with what is the limitations of 5G technology. So everybody knows 5G has a target to provide 20 gigabps as a peak data rate. But when alternative vehicle service is in reality, one vehicle require more than 5 gigabps, maximally 20 gigabps. Then that will consume all the data capacity of 5G. So if we wanted to have a very smooth automotive vehicles in the street, we need more data service, more higher capacity to support those vehicles. That provide the 6G requirement for the maximum data speed, and also delay. 5G provide very low latency, but that is only for the wireless component. 5G could not solve the wireline latency reduction. So 6G has that requirement, and also coverage only for the ground services. But in the future, there are a lot of flying devices in the over the air. So 6G will support those as a requirement. AI is not really incorporated in the communication technology yet. So we believe 6G will solve those issues too. So this slide shows what we think as a key performance indicator for 6G. We had three component, three key KPI for 5G, but 6G will have more. So first one will be ultra performance to have a higher speed, maximum speed and user felt speed. And ultra bandwidth, we believe we need more bandwidth. That means we need to consider higher frequency band over 100 gigahertz band. And also ultra precision, we need more small latency, even end to end. And ultra space means over the air up to 10 kilometers. We need provide service, mobile connection service, and also AI-based intelligence network. We call it ultra intelligence. These five KPI will be covered by this technology. So in Korea, we include all this coverage as a 6G as a scope. So first thing is wireless communication as the fourth generation and fifth generation mainly focus on, but RF component is very critical to support higher frequency band, and optical communication require to support a higher data rate to support increasing wireless technology. The wired communication is also one part of the 6G technology coverage. As a new introduced, aerial satellite communication is quite new for the communication, but we believe in the 6G period, satellite communication, mobile communication will be combined to support the space communication, not only ground and also airspace. So about the schedule, if we come back to the 5G, IITU started their standard for 5G 2013, and WRC 15 and 19 had a role for specify the spectrum for 5G. Similarly, we believe 6G ITU will start 6G standard from this year. Actually, already started to develop the vision for the 6G. So after all, ITU 2028 or 2027, they will finalize technology defined. That is not finalized schedule yet, but we expected that. For the technical 3PP standard, we believe comparing to 5G standard schedule, around 2023, 23rd will be the 3PP standard starting point, but mainly technical discussion will be started to 2024. So we expected the final 3PP standard for 6G will be 2027 or 2028, which will make possible commercialization possible around 2028 or 2029. So this is the overall schedule for 6G in ITU and 3PP. So we believe Korean government believe we prepare those schedule by developing technologies. So this is the what Korean government announced last year as a 6G vision. We wanted a leading 6G era as we did for 5G. So we set up the 3 strategy. First thing is next generation technology development and standard patent effort support and infrastructure. I wanted to share briefly what these strategies. So fourth thing is about the strategy for developing 6G technology. Korean government will invest around 20 million dollars in Korean won, 214 billion won, for around 5 years. Main project will be for the to provide high peak data rate. So our target is 1 terabps transmission speed, and latency will be end-to-end 5 millisecond. Those requirement will be achieved by through the R&D development, and also to support service expansion up to 10 kilometers. We also will do the R&D for satellite communication. And AI technology to internet network, we invest several R&D project to develop merging AI technology into wireless communication, or also network development. And security from the starting, we also several projects to develop security solutions for 6G new system. For that, also global collaboration is very important. As a very important partner, America is the very key. So today's workshop is for making new project between 2 countries. So from this, we wanted to more project next year and after next year also. And this slide shows what we wanted to do for standard and also patent. We will strongly support ITU and 3PP standard efforts in private sectors or also public sectors. Standard is mainly for collaboration between multiple countries, or we believe America is a very important partner to work together for the global standard. This slide shows what we wanted to do, the infrastructure. We believe the real component for supporting communication product. So mainly RF component is very key. So our government will invest Korean companies to develop very critical component for supporting higher frequency band. And also we invest educational program to help students and professors to work on the telecommunication area. This is the last slide. We Korean government set up the kind of strategy committee to support 6G development, work with the Korean telecommunication carriers and manufacturers, and also forums and institute from the private sectors. We will have a regular strategy committee meetings to check the schedule and the global status for the 6G. We will develop rolling plans every year to meet the situation in the global situation. So using those architecture, we will have around five-year project for 6G. After that, we will continue the project to make 6G commercialization successful in Korea. So thank you very much for your listening. This is all.
Thank you so much. So the next keynote is Dr. Tiagananda Gopal. So Tiaga.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you, Sung-ho, for that excellent introduction into what we think is going to be the future of wireless going beyond 5G. And in fact, I anticipated this kind of a beautiful slide presentation from them. And we've been very compelled by the vision that our IITP colleagues have presented. So, I told Alex that I'm not going to actually present any slides because I cannot beat that. So I'm going to talk without slides. And again, I would say that everything that Sung-ho says about the importance and the scope and the charge of 6G is something that we should all, that we get behind. We agree completely that it's there. We also think that, at least from the NSF perspective, that 6G is definitely there. It's going to be a big part of the vision of what is going to happen beyond 5G. But we also would like to point out that the world doesn't revolve entirely around the cellular version of the story. And you can see that broadening of the beyond cellular approach happening in 5G. And I think that, like as Sung-ho said, like we see satellites, we see sensors. Those are all not necessarily cellular. It's like a different kind of a network, wireless network. So to the extent of that broad vision, I think we are all in alignment. How we call it and how the industry calls it will change, but we should all make sure that we understand that wireless is increasingly diversifying from its narrow scope from a cellular driven or a Wi-Fi based system to a much more all-encompassing multi-spectral band, multi-modal, diverse network architecture effort that we should all be thinking about as researchers. So I think so that is a great place, a vision slide to keep. So if you all get a chance to get the slides from Sung-ho, I would like ask you guys to frame that particular picture. Think about the future problems. It's a great place to start. I would like to focus a little bit on what NSF sees in partnerships in general, especially around wireless. So the partnership that we have announced with South Korea and IITP in particular is one among many partnerships, and building on, for example, relationships with Ireland, with Israel, Finland, and now with South Korea. And the reason we are doing this is something that is important for all of us to know. We are increasingly seeing that more and more countries are investing resources into creating innovation ecosystems around wireless and communications in general. And why is that? Because we have seen the power of a device, the smartphones, for example, and the change they have unleashed upon society as a whole by bringing in an entire economic sector to life. Things like on-demand cabs or food delivery services and so forth, which one would never think would have been possible 15 years ago. And that realization that ubiquitous, always available network communication systems can bring in terms of novel services that average person sees and benefits from is what is driving many countries to invest a lot and heavily into wireless communications the next generation of systems to become better at deploying these systems nationally in their individual countries. And of course, the countries that we are partnering with are leaders in this space. Finland and South Korea South Korea has been a champion in broadband adoption and deployment early on compared to most countries around the world. And in fact, today, as of today, I think South Korea already has achieved 90% coverage of under 5G, which is a feat that many countries cannot claim as something that they have done. So we also have seen the nature of digital services that are being tried out in South Korea as something that sets the stage for innovation, for other countries to kind of learn from and emulate in many cases. So we believe that the future of what lies beyond 5G, whether we talk about systems in general, or circuits, or spectrum management, or even cloud convergence with the cloud and services in the computing and communications paradigm. All of them leads to the one common place: innovative services, right? And innovative services that the users, and not necessarily, when I say user, it's not necessarily a user who is using a smartphone, but user meaning businesses, devices, sensors, and the city governments, all of them are users in that sense. All of them stand to benefit a lot from the creation of innovative services. And we would like to see our researchers think big and bold with that big picture in mind. So we want to start, not just focus on, let's go from 1 gig to 10 gig, but think about why you need that 1 gig to 10 gig, right? And where do you need it? And what kind of innovative applications would benefit from it? So keep that big picture in mind, because that innovation ultimately is what makes the case for continuous investment in this space, right? And I would like to encourage folks to think about this, because some of these challenges are not easy challenges to make. So millimeter waves is a great example. People have tried a lot to make millimeter wave based communications work in the 90s. And they kind of gave up at that point because the technology available and the state of the understanding of propagation models at that time was not enough to make things happen. But then, as we started seeing the demand for more bandwidth come through, at some point somebody had this vision. People like Ted Rappaport, funded by NSF, had the vision to say, let's go look at this problem once again and see if this really is a problem. Right? Because we really need the bandwidth and there's not many places to look for it. So that persistence led to the discovery that, hey, yes, millimeter waves are actually not that bad when it comes to propagation. So let's use them as the basis for a future communication network. And we are seeing those results in less than 10 years now, right? So I would encourage all of you to think about the big picture. What might happen 10 years from now? What is the vision that we see? And this is what I kind of like the picture that Sung Ho paints in this slide, that if you have that vision in hand, any obstacles that seem like insurmountable right now might actually become much more manageable and feasible if you keep tackling them in a small, break it down into smaller pieces and tackle different pieces at different times. So this collaboration that you are going to create, hopefully in the breakouts that we are going to have today, you will see opportunities where you see like-minded folks or complementary set of folks who would come together and say, hey, I have this vision, I would like to work on these problems, and here's my skill set. And we kind of, we could work together. So try to identify those opportunities, because we're not necessarily looking just for an opportunity now. Like, it's not, this workshop is not about creating a team that can submit a proposal in a month's time. This workshop goes beyond that. Yes, you should try to do that if possible, but beyond that, we also want you to continue this partnership, continue working with these with the colleagues on both sides, and help solve some of the pressing problems that prevent us from realizing this vision for next year, right? And that's exactly why this is not a single opportunity partnership. There's going to be multiple rounds of funding opportunities that Murat is going to talk more about. And we want everyone to remember that, you don't just go in it thinking that, if I don't make something work now, I should just stop. Think of this as the start of a relationship that will allow us to work together, basically take the best of both sides, the best of the ideas, best of the resources, and the best of the data sets, and the best of lessons learned from how services are deployed and used by people on both sides of this partnership, and use that to create the best or the ideal solutions that will benefit all of us and advance the state of the art at the same time. Okay, so keep that big picture in mind, and along the way, you should be aware that there are great resources that NSF is bringing to the table here. We have our investments in test beds. The platforms for advanced wireless research is available for you to use, for researchers on both sides to utilize. So that's something that you can plan on for your testing and validation efforts. And I'm sure that our South Korean colleagues have similar resources on hand to offer. And this is some of the things that you should discuss as part of your collaboration discussions, right? And again, many of you know about the RFI, the request for information that we had issued recently. This is trying to identify the data set needs for doing effective research and development in computer and network systems topics. Again, we received many responses, many of them relating to next generation network design. So we are going to be working on that as well and try to see how do we make more resources available to the research community. So NSF strongly believes that advanced wireless is an industry of the future, and this is our official position of the US federal government as well. And we are encouraging our researchers to engage in these partnerships so that we get the best value out of the investments governments are making all over the world in pursuing this topic, right? And this is not necessarily a competition. This is what we call as working together to get the benefits for all of mankind. And so let's think of that in that spirit and make sure that we find opportunities for collaboration with each other. So with that, let me stop and hand it off to Alex back for any Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much. So please submit your questions. We have a few minutes. And I think it's a question for Seung-ho, right? What contributes to high wired latency in 5G, 6G? Okay, I thought that wireless latency is usually higher than wired latency. I think it's wired, it's probably core network, right? I guess it depends what is included in wired communication part. Okay. And
okay, so is there any written?
Yeah, it's in chat. If you can look,
I try to find out. There is no.
Yeah,
right?
if you open chat,
Okay.
there's questions there. But also,
Alex, can you maybe repost it because I don't actually see that question.
Yeah, sorry about. Yeah, thanks for telling me, and I will repost it. But also, Huijun, if you're around, like, would you like to ask these questions? You can unmute yourself.
Sure, I can. Hi, my name
Okay,
is
go
Jun.
ahead. Yeah, it's the best.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh yeah, sorry. So my name is Jun from Princeton. Yeah, so the chat window actually just limits me to send it to the co-hosts. It doesn't let me ask the question to everyone. But anyway, my question was like, yeah, I was just curious, what's the wired latency part? Like,
okay,
if you think about it, Wi-Fi is, it has a higher latency in wired, so maybe I don't understand something here.
I understand. So I understand that question. So wired line had a latency usually because the IP traffic congestions. As you know, there is no guaranteed service over the IP networks. So with that, and also there is a long latency, long distance from the America and Korea. It's a long distance, right? So how can we guarantee the for example, 5 millisecond delay guaranteed? It's not possible actually. So I know there is a lot of efforts in the R&D side or standard in ITU or ISO side. They evaluated how to upgrade upgrade the wireline communication efforts. So there is several few ideas to reduce or guarantee the end-to-end delay reduction. So I believe 6G should incorporate those efforts into the standard 3PP standard to show we can achieve the end-to-end low delay latencies with the QS support.
I understand. Thanks.
Enough. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Any other questions? So if you if you can send a question to me, I will be happy to repost. Or
also, one of the questions added in this slide was, can my slides can be shared? I will. Yeah. I will share. How can I share? I don't know, but I will send the NSF.
Send it to me. I have a list of all people who registered, so I can just send it there.
Okay, yeah. I will send the document to you.
Okay. 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 So any other questions from the audience? And maybe I can ask a quick question, right? So we, as you know, we announced recently our RINGS program. I'm not sure if in Korea it's known, right? But we just recently have this initiative for reliable and secure NextG, right? So I just wanted to ask both keynote speakers if they can comment about security, right? So if it's possible to, how important it is, and it's possible to do it as in kind of security by design, or have security/resilience as a first-class citizen. So if you would like Dr. Sung Ho and then Tiaga.
Sung Ho, go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't catch the question.
Oh, sorry. So the question is about security and resilience or robustness of such systems. So what is your view of how to enable security and how important it is, and reliability? So it's kind of an addition to traditional metrics such as performance, right?
So we believe the security of the network is very critical, very important. We learned from 5G commercialization. We started the 5G commercialization, but we could meet a lot of challenges for security. That's why I add the security from the design for the 6G. But we have some set of the engineers and researchers on the security area. They are working for the current 5G infrastructure security issues, mainly on the mobile edge computing, and also using the blockchain technology into the services. But for the 6G direction is just started, so I cannot tell anything more on the 6G area, but we have just views security from the starting from the design is very important. But we want to learn from your views on that topic too.
Okay, thank you. And Tiaga, you want to?
Yeah, I think for us, the fact that we created a program around resilient next generation systems, says a lot about our priorities there. We really believe that security by design has to be one of our defining principles for next generation networks, mainly because what we are now seeing is a transition from communication technologies from being a good to have to a must have, right? So it used to be that, yes, you couldn't call people, fine, you could just walk over or drive to them and talk to them. That's how it used to be before, right? You could send them an email or something. You could do other things instead of just calling them up or doing something on your wireless network. If the wireless network went down, inconvenience, not a big deal. But now that is no longer the case. Your wireless network goes down. You actually don't know how to reach out to do certain things. You cannot really go to a bank because there are online only banks, and many people don't even have a broadband connection at home. So if you lose your wireless connection, that's it. You are cut off from from your financial system, right? So that's a serious problem. And now we are talking about increasing delivery of telehealth services, where in some cases that's seen as a more economical way of delivering healthcare. And if you lose your wireless connectivity, then people don't have access to that health system, right? So we have gone from telecommunications going away from a nice to have convenience to a must have necessity. And as with anything that's must have, it better work and it better be something that nobody can damage or affect in any way, right? So we have a challenge in this community overall, because we have been brought up thinking that this is not necessarily a big problem. Security of network is not necessarily a big problem. But every day we have instances, right? Even like day before yesterday, we had Amazon and Reddit and a few other big major websites that were brought down for an hour because one of the CDNs, content delivery networks along the pipe, decided to do an upgrade that ended up being faulty. Right? That's like lost billions of dollars in economic damage. Unintentional, but we cannot afford that to be the case. Every day something of this nature happening, because someday or other somebody's going to die, right? Or people are going to die as a result of these kinds of issues. And we would like to revisit that decision, the way we think about networks starting now, right? And that's the reason why we invested in the Resilient and Intelligent Network System, Next Generation Systems program. Again, we are not calling it networks program, but a systems program, because we think it pervades the issues of security by design, pervades not just networking, but also systems, right? And I would like to encourage everyone to think, don't restrict yourself to thinking along those lines only for submitting to a program. This is going to be the future, right? A security aware design is going to carry much more weight than something that is not. Okay, that's how we see it from the NSF perspective. And I would encourage everyone to start thinking that when you start reimagining what an XG system is going to look like.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think there is no more questions. So let's thank the speakers. Please feel free to put some virtual claps. Right? Thank you so much, Tiago and Seungho. So I don't want to start early with Murad because we want to synchronize with 8 a.m. in Korea. But since we have a few minutes, I just wanted to invite Dr. Kaushik Chowdhury to talk a little bit about power platforms that mentioned by Tiago. So Kaushik.
Thank you, Alex. Can I share my screen? Is it okay?
Yeah, you can share your screen, right?
Wonderful. So thank you everyone for
about this OpenAirX initiative, and just a brief overview. You have 7 minutes.
Yes, excellent. So I'll just give you a very brief overview, and first let me start out by saying why something like the NSF Power program can really complement a program like this that you are setting up. So the first thing is these are a number of at-scale experimental platforms where you can run real protocols, real new kinds of algorithms in the wild. And this was a visionary program in which it brings together, of course, the National Science Foundation provides half of these total resources. It's a $100 million cash and in-kind contribution program. Now, along with the National Science Foundation, there's an industry consortium that works with the awardees. So the way this program has been designed is that in coordination with all the sponsors and these entities that have provided this funding, the Power Project Office works to identify community scale platforms where researchers will be able to implement their ideas. To think of it as this one step before it goes to the production level environment. So we're very proud to say that there are 3 platforms that are supported already that are in various stages of development. And I just want to point out to the slide that was presented earlier by the Korean delegation. So here is the fact. There was a question about limited 5G capacity and end-to-end delays. And so if you can push this up to very high transmission speeds, low latency. So the Salt Lake City test bed that you see on the left-hand side, this one has massive MIMO for experimenters to experiment with. The New York City has extensive deployment of millimeter wave radios for people to try a massive bandwidth. So here you are looking at massive number of antennas on the left to massive bandwidth in New York City. There's a question on, so there was a direction on, could you have from ground-centered service from 5G to 6G, can you go to various levels of service, air, and so on? So on the right-hand side, you see the power testbed in the Research Triangle area, the air power testbed. Now that is meant for drone-based experimentation. On the other side, there is a part about moving a lot of these works into AI and AI-assisted optimization. So all of these platforms have compute clouds that are connected to the front ends of the radio platforms. Data streams at different layers of the stack can be pushed back and analyzed, and then you can reactivate the RF environment. So these platforms are just are excellent to test out these ideas. I also want to say that these three platforms are also supported by the world's largest RF emulator called Colosseum. It's a number, it's about 128 software-defined radios that can create and emulate virtual worlds. So you don't really have to be in a location, but you can test these in containers. And then once you perfect them in an emulation environment, so no over the air, the whole channel is emulated, you can take them as is and go and experiment on a power platform like Powder. So there is a continuity of experimentation and so on. And finally, the OpenAirX Lab is a new initiative that has just been launched. And the whole goal is to accelerate more open source development. So open source work that is tested within the Power program can then be pushed further into open source releases, part of the OAI framework, etc. So it will allow everyone to join in and use these shared resources to experiment. So with that, I just want to say that the Power Project Office will always be very happy to respond to specific questions and support experimenters, connect experimenters with the performers, and these people are extremely dedicated and really willing to engage with the community. So I'll just pause here with that high-level description, but I'm very happy to take more questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kaushik, for doing this. So you have a few minutes. If anybody has any questions, please speak up or put a text. Okay, otherwise we have a breakout about testbed, so you're welcome to join us as well. So just let's wait for anybody who has any questions to ask. Okay, if not, thank you so much again, Kaushik. And then I will, my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Murat Torlak. So he will be talking about this specific, I think there's one question, Kaushik, to you, right? So how mature is testbed now? How we can use it for research we do in this space? I'm not sure, maybe David, can you ask us? Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, the question is we have been hearing a lot and intrigued by the kind of investment NSF has put in Power, and we were thinking of like when would the community, especially those who are not directly involved in the testbed, be able to kind of benefit from this testbed in the form of what is promised in the testbed of data and infrastructure and so forth?
Well, a number of these testbeds are open for business. So, for example, you can go today into the Power into the say the Powder website and reserve time, use one of their standard containers, and just start. So it's something that we support. Some of these platforms are ready to go today. Cosmos has a number of deployments that you can reserve and start using today. So both Cosmos and Powder, they were the earlier ones that were awarded. Those have some levels of availability right now. So you can go test with Massive MIMO and Powder. You can test with SRS LTE, different sorts of variations of LTE. You can go test with some in a more constrained environment, the millimeter wave story in Cosmos. So these are all available, and there's some ready tutorials on each of these sites. So it's ready. There are more advanced features that we are rolling out, which will come out over this summer and then later on in the next year. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kaushik. Yeah, so now we exactly schedule. So again, my pleasure to introduce my colleague Murat Torlak. So Murat, take it away.
Well, Alex, thank you. And also thank the earlier speakers, Dr. Choi, Dr. Nandagopal from NSF, and Kaushik's presentation on power they were all to the point, and they were all good. In fact, as I was listening to the early, previous speakers, it also occurred to me that the South Korea, obviously, even before 5G or 6G, they were actually quite. They were putting a lot of efforts even early on, even late 90s. I remember, for instance, their adoption of broadband, maybe even 98. And that's the time that I was doing my PhD. And I remember several ITU proposals actually from those days. And of course, there was a lot of discussion if it's going to be CDMA or WiMAX. Of course, in the end, what happened was that I believe that there's a research sort of paved the way. I mean, there were like a lot of alternatives. That was the good thing, right? There was a lot of alternatives. Who put those alternatives? The researchers, from different countries. And in the end, sort of the marketplace and the users sort of decided, which technology to use. And eventually, LTE sort of won the, probably the hearts of the users. And so, I mean, so there's a lot of history there from South Korea side, and so therefore it's not a surprise that NSF is actually partnering with the South Korea to, advance the wireless technology even further. Another positive thing that I can share with you is that I was a while ago, probably more than a year ago, I was listening to a colleague of mine in the US in a workshop. He said that at NSF, we are sort of, we shy away from using, first, second generation, giving numbers to various generation wireless technologies. Nevertheless, I mean, people, public sort of accept this. And he was saying that, typically as an industry, we get the odd number generations sort of wrong. I mean, or they're not complete in some sense, but we get the even number of generations correctly, and they become very robust. And as we've seen with the second generation, probably the fourth generation 4G, and hopefully with the 6G. So we see a lot of potential, as Dr. Choi was saying, that there was certain things that we couldn't get it right with 5G, like for instance, the security. As a result, I believe that there are a lot of opportunities for researchers from both countries to come together and get this thing right. And hopefully the partnership will pave the way, provide the resources to the researchers from both countries. With that, instead of creating additional set of slides to read, what I wanted to do is I want to just share the DCL, because in the end, even if we get something not right, or we misspeak or something like that, and during this presentation, whatever DCL tells about the program counts. What is written in DCL will govern how we are going to implement the partnership, how we're going to collect proposals, how we're going to evaluate the proposals, and eventually make funding recommendations. So let me just share my screen regarding that. So let me go back real quick and open this. Okay. Share. All right. So as you know, the NSF calls for proposals in different ways. One standard way is solar station. They are more established programs. They are more sort of routine. the other mechanism is DCL, which is probably lesser known of this, call for proposals. One of the lesser known of the vehicles exist at NSF. And it is very suitable for this type of partnership programs, international partnership programs. And DCL is actually stands for Dear Colleague Letter. As you may have seen this DCL many times, but if you just want to sort of go over this a little bit with me, and if you have any questions during this time, please do post them in the chat. So, of course, to develop such a joint partnership program, there must be some sort of agreement between the agencies of both countries, and that is done through memorandum of understanding, MOUs. And this MOU will govern any the activities over a period of 5 years. So this 5 years doesn't mean the length of the project, it's just the length of this partnership. So it's a start of actually a long and hopefully fruitful relationship between NSF and IITP of the South Korea. So so this is our first year, but we expect that we'll have maybe additional opportunities next year and then the following years. And other thing to pay attention is that how does the submission is done and under what program. So there are 2 directorates at NSF are participating this, especially, and then at the engineering side, the particular division, ECCS, Communication Circuits and Sensing program is participating. But from the SAI side, all the core programs are participating in this partnership, meaning that you can NSF, the US researchers can submit any of these 2 programs, but under the small project class, meaning that the US side can only ask up to 500K funding, only the US researchers. Of course, the IITP funding depends on what the announcement from the IITP side, and that can be actually found from their online page, and you can follow up with IITP to see the South Korean side of the funding. An important step in this submission is that the South Korean applicants must obtain the eligibility letter from IITP. Therefore, they have to submit letter of intent to IITP using the template provided in their relevant call. So this is a very important step because that's where you get the eligibility, because once you obtain the eligibility letter, then that letter has to be submitted along with the NSF proposals. Therefore, for partners, collaborators from both countries, very important that that initial first step that is followed. Of course, any questions regarding these steps, please feel free to reach out to me or Junho from the South Korea. So you can actually find out who to reach out to. Again, in this DCL at the NSF, you can direct your questions to me or Zhengda Wang from the Engineering Division of Electrical and Communication Cyber Systems. For the questions about IITP should be directed to Junho Cho. He is the Deputy Director at IITP. So if you actually go through these, guidelines, they are very obvious, but nevertheless, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And it's very important that you submitters follow these steps, and then we are hoping to collect a lot of strong proposals, and the proposals will be evaluated in the regular panels at NSF. So these proposals that submitted to NSF, the joint proposals submitted under this DSL, will be evaluated like any other NSF proposal. So we won't be establishing a different evaluation mechanism. On the other hand, we will instruct our panelists to make sure that that this proposal is a joint proposal, and the panelists will also look at the collaboration, the plan, if the collaboration makes sense, if both sides bring, different, matching expertise, if there's a synergy, and if the collaboration makes sense in terms of the proposed research. So with that, I like to basically probably stop here. And Alex, I don't know if you want to give chance to Junho to talk about this, the IITP perspective in the partnership. So what things to pay attention to in the submission process?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So first of all, if there are any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. Actually, I see one question that I will repost in general, but Junho, if you have anything to add to what Murat said. Okay. Okay. So the first question is okay. Okay, so the first question for let me see, just 1 second. Donghoon, David Kim, would you like to ask this question? David Kim, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. So I checked the Korean website, IITP, about this proposal, and they have a separate announcement. And it seems like they have a 4-year funding plan. Let me see. With a certain amount. So this amount is only from South Korea government to IITP to South Korea investigator, and the NSF will be supporting US investigator, right? Separately.
Yes. Yeah. So each site supports its own researchers. So that's exactly right.
So US NSF will review the proposal, and both will be agreed to fund each counterpart for roughly 3 years, right? NSF
Yes.
will treat this as a small proposal, right?
Yes, the proposals under this DCL needs to be submitted under the small project class, which means that they have up to 500K. The US partners can ask up to 500K, and it will be evaluated like any other small project proposal. However, so we will, rank the proposal, share our findings with our South Korean partners. But in the end, NSF will make the, final recommendation. Of course, it will be shared with the South Korean side, and then we'll reach to some consensus about which proposal to fund. But the South Korean researchers will be funded by IITP directly. But the proposal, of course, has to make sense, the synergy, the scope, how the role of partners from both sides have to be reasonable, and the panels, NSF panels, have to find that meaningful and funding worthy.
Okay, it's clear enough. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So again, please type your questions in the chat if you have questions, or you can just raise your hand. If you go like the Zoom bar on the bottom, there is reaction, and under this reaction, please raise your hand. So I will call on you if you have any questions regarding solicitation and anything else. So the one question that came was on if this will count as a 2-year, as a kind of one of the tokens, right? So every NSF researcher can only submit 2 proposals in any 12 months, right? So and the question was, will those proposals in collaboration with South Korea will count for this towards this limit?
The answer is yes, it will count towards the 2 proposal limit in the small project class. But as just a reminder, there are 2, there's also engineering division, right? So they are also participating this. They also have their own limits, but it's not the limit goes by division. I mean, by the directorate. It doesn't go, it's not a NSF-wide limit, but is a directorate-wide limit.
Thank you. So the next question, Jun Kim. So please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, I have a question to probably Dr. Choi at IITP. So I also checked the South Korean version of the announcement, and it looks like the funding from the South Korea side is like more than twice than of that NSF amount. So is there any expectation on the size of the team that IITP is thinking of? Can you share your opinion on that? How many people do you expect per project?
Okay. It is in Korean won, it's about 4,000 won. So in our case, that size, you can make one organization, one university with some professors, or one university and participating other university, maybe some case. So we just do not have a restriction on number of the professor participating. It is only your suggestions.
Okay.
So you can only participate one professor with a research student. Yeah.
If you need to say something in Korean as well, so welcome, because it kind of relates to Korean.
So just if I might add a comment here, because it came up, I think, in our discussions too during this partnership negotiations. As you know, the NS, of course, I cannot speak for IITP, but I'm just gonna say what I heard from Junho. Of course, he can confirm or refute what I'm saying. So as you know, at the NSF, we have infrastructure programs as well, right, for large equipment purchases. So typically in small program, we don't encourage our PIs to put money for big purchases of equipment, because we do have different programs for PI to sort of put money into. My understanding from that earlier discussion is that that's not the case probably for IITP. So it may be possible for South Korean researchers to even budget large equipment, maybe big network analyzers or things like that, spend money, budget, spend the money for big equipment that would serve the project. Probably this is one of the plus side of this partnership, is that such a flexibility exists at the South Korean side. So I'm just gonna let Junho to either confirm that or comment on that understanding of mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarek. Yeah, in Korean language, 저희 한국 과제는 일반 과제하고 똑같다고 보시면 되고요. 인건비하고 뭐 연구 활동비, 연구 장비 재료비, 이런 과제 수행을 위해서 필요한 경비가 좀 필요하실 때 과제 비용으로 하실 수 있고요. 그래서 특히 이동통신 하드웨어 같은 그런 과제를 통해서 뭐 그런 부분 뭐 비용도 있기 때문에 한국 측은 그래도 어느 정도 의미 있는 과제 수행을 위해서 저희가 4억 원, 연 4억 원 정도 되는 규모의 과제로 협력하기로 좀 기획이 된 상황입니다. 올해 같은 경우는.
Okay, thanks.
Is it enough for the question?
Yeah, they can also always follow up with you, right?
Yeah, follow up with you to further clarify, right? That's the, please, any of the participants can follow up with Junho to clarify any of the issues. So Alex, will you, I guess you want to take the other questions, or?
Yeah, I think Jun Kim, I think he is waiting, and then Tarek,
Sure.
right? So we have like the raised hand, and please introduce yourself and where you're from also.
Yeah, that would be nice.
So Jun Kim again from Princeton University. I'm a research scholar there, or a research scientist. So my question is a very simple one. Just a clarification. So this is like a tandem stuff, like, right? Like there's no case where the Korean researcher got the money from IITP, but the collaborator in the US researcher does not get the NSF. Like, you know, it's tandem, like they're in together or out together at the same time or not.
I think that probably your question is a little bit similar to another question that we have in chat. I think what that question, let me read that question. In the Korean side, the IITP will support, you know, 2 projects, but of course this is up to IITP, you know, how many will be supported, you know, etc. So that depends how they make their selection of eligibility letters, you know, etc. So I think the question is that, can an NSF project be accepted even if the Korean side is not funded? Okay, I think somehow related to that question, right? The answer is yes, we can. NSF has the option to fund the NSF side if the project is highly rated, but if South Korean IITP decides not to fund for one reason or another, or don't have, I mean, it's up to them to fund that. But ideal situation, obviously, I mean, the reason that we are in this, that both sides fund it and find ways to fund that project through different mechanisms and through better coordination, etc. So intent is definitely not that, right? So we will do everything in our power to fund both sides, but technically it's possible.
Yeah, so yeah, what Murat says, we will consider this, right? So suppose we got a lot of proposals and they all panels kind of rank them very highly, right? So we can consider funding, but only US side. So then we need to make some changes, right? So, and we need to see if this US side only will be compelling enough, right? So for funding, right? But each of this will be dealt with by kind of case by case basis, right? But we have a freedom, like just to convert it, so to speak, to just to regular NSF proposal, because you're also using your limit, right? So, and I think Junho, if you want to kind of take on this question, if, for example, if NSF will not fund it, right? So can you fund it from IITP? It's kind of
other way around.
Other way around, right? So it's a question to you.
So I will just briefly introduce the Korean side about our Korean side on call announcement and explain some point that will be maybe helpful for all of them.
Sure.
Can I share my screen?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, this is our Korean ICT R&D management side, easy one. That is our ICT R&D announcement is here. We can see the latest, the NSF and IITP joint call in detail. Yeah, this said, first one is the Korean side, Korean researcher needed to submit until the August 18th. Then they will submit to the NSF in the September. That is the time limitation in Korean side for the eligibility check. And the main question is here, why the Korean side has double the money. we just start this year to collaborate to NSF with a small program. They have a 3-year, 50 million, this size budget. And in Korean side, we normally plan our new research, joint research about in Korea, 사업원, 연간 사업원 scale. So it is about 2-to-1 side. But it is explained as TORAC, and in US and Korea side, the research R&D fund is somewhat a difference. So in any case, we hope the Korean researcher, Korean principal investigator, and US principal investigator collaborate on single proposal, and they seek to joint final goal with this joint research. So that is my explain about our side. Thank you.
So from what I understand, that if we will not be selected by NSF, so it will not be funded, right? So by IITP, but again, so Tarek, you have a question, so probably we need to go to breakout soon, but last question from Tarek. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Go ahead.
All right.
Introduce yourself, yeah.
Okay, I have two simple questions. First one is, what is the schedule of the RFP, and you know, when is the deadline to submit? That's one question. The other one is regarding the 2 limit on NSF, that institution shouldn't have more than 2 NSF. Can you explain that more? For example, is it per PI or per institution? That's
per PI.
Per PI. And the PI, if he is PI in one and co-PI in another.
Yeah, it doesn't, it just, yeah. So both counts against that limit of 2 small project proposals.
So,
to size.
Brad, let me try to
okay.
use an example there. Let's assume that you and your colleague submit a proposal. I'm working with somebody in South Korea, right? But if your colleague has already submitted one proposal to NSF, let's say by themselves to this particular program, to the core program in size, their count is 1. If you haven't submitted anything in the last 12 months, your count is 0, right? So when you submit together, your colleague's count now becomes 2 and yours becomes 1, right? So that's how the count works. It's on a per PI basis. We'll track it on every person and we'll make the count. So let's assume that you are submitting with someone who's already submitted 2 and they are included here, then we'll say, no, that submission is not allowed because they've already submitted 2. So you should make sure to check with your colleagues who are you working with on the US side, if they have submitted to the core programs within the last 12 months, right? And if they submitted 2 already, then you don't want them on the proposal because that will disqualify your proposal.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And the second question was about timeline. So Murat, can you?
So timeline. Okay. So that's of course in this partnership, right? There are 2 sides. So let me tell you about the NSF side. The NSF programs in the small project class now implementing no deadline, meaning that any interested US investigators submit a proposal to small project class under small project class. So NSF, technically no deadline whatsoever. Except that the eligibility or the limits, etc. On the other hand, to be able to submit a proposal under this DSL, obviously you need a South Korean investigators on your proposal, but their eligibility depends on IITP, right, or their deadlines, etc. Therefore, it is very important to talk to your partners from South Korea and let them understand their schedule, their timeline, how to obtain the eligibility letters, etc. So that's when you come together. So one side is governed by the rules and timelines and deadlines governed by their prospective agencies. NSF side is governed by our eligibility rules and our deadlines, our rules, and etc. But both sides submit together individually. Both sides have to satisfy their own rules. So then you need to find that window opportunity to submit your proposal for obviously the best chance. Based on the current the timeline of both sides, perhaps the best timeline is that you should plan on submitting a proposal before September to NSF. But that's just our suggestion because, as I said, both sides, they have their own deadlines, etc. So then you should sort of go back from that possible target date and work with your South Korean investigator partner to basically start the process of getting the eligibility check, getting the letters, all of those the steps that we have in DCL. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, that's very clear. One last thing regarding the budget, when it's going to start, when we submit the proposal, it will start when? Like January 2022 or September 2022? Any
So the goal is to start early next year. Of course, as I explained, as the eligibility rules and timelines are different both sides. So again, the availability of money, the funding, etc. Again, that depends on both sides. So again, you need to come together with your U.S. both sides have to come together and then maybe suggest a start date or follow the instructions in both sides to set your proposal start date for your project. But the goal is to get this started. Junho, please correct me if you are targeting early January 2022?
No. In Korea side, we hope later this year, like November or December.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Okay, November or December of 2021 is the target start date. If such a proposal is recommended for funding, the target is either late November or early December.
How many proposals are expected from the NSF side?
There's no, the NSF side, we don't have a limit.
Okay.
Again, the South Korean investigators have to go through their own channels and obtain the eligibility letters. And so they have to work with their agencies to get the eligibility, and that sort of will determine, how many we will be able to get.
So I just wanted to add one thing because Murat, you mentioned the small size of the projects. I just want to remind the audience that the engineering ECCS division doesn't really have a small, large, or medium project size. So all of our proposal submissions come under the unsolicited proposals, and we don't have a size definition. So just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Mohammed.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much again. And maybe Junho, would you like to comment about D-Day? It's like.
Yeah. As I already showed our Korean side R&D call announcement, the U.S. research can think about this. The Korean researcher will be submit close to final draft until the August 18th. Then the final proposal will be submit until the September 15th, maybe. I hope that is the overall deadlines.
Because your eligibility letter will have sort of a target rate, right? Is that the thing?
Early September,
okay.
I think. Yeah.
So that letter will be valid only certain duration. And if the PIs for some reason they decide not to submit it, then they miss the chance to submit together. But of course, NSF researcher or the US investigator always has the option to submit their own part separately later on. They can still invite probably South Korean side to be on the proposal, but then they may not get the funding from IITP. They can just work together, just, you know, like researchers.
Yeah, just for the comment, the Korean side eligibility check is not a big deal. Just checking he has a you know, he has too many projects. That is one point, and he has anything defect on the researching the national R&D project. So maybe most of the submitted project will be go to the final pre-proposal stage. Yeah, that's the point.
Okay, so if there are any other questions, you feel free to email to Murat or Dr. Choi, right? So I'm sure they will be able to respond. So now we're going to breakout sessions, and again, like if you responded to poll, I will try to put you in the same breakout sessions if you responded, if the system works, or magically everybody will be assigned there. So just to remind you, right, so we have one about testing and test beds, the second about medium access RAN, and then we have spectrum and RF layer, physical layer, then we have RF and wireless edge cloud, which is also very popular. So also I wanted to introduce my colleague, Eric Brunwald, who just joined kind of just a little later. So Eric, would you like to just quickly introduce yourself, and you will be moderator for this Edge Cloud, and thanks for your contribution.
Sure. My name's Eric Brunvand. I'm a rotating program officer at the National Science Foundation. My home institution is at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, and my own research interest is in computer systems. And so I think that's why Alex asked me to help with the wireless edge cloud. I know quite a bit about edge and cloud and almost nothing about wireless, but that's 2 out of 3. So maybe, maybe I can help facilitate a conversation.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, the goal of those breakouts is more to get everybody to know, right? It's just a teaming meeting. So just you can go introduce yourself and hopefully exchange ideas so host can facilitate. So hopefully it will not be awkward, you know, that many people joining. So just to break the ice and see if people are willing to talk to each other, right? And okay, so I will try to click this magic button. If you're in a wrong breakout, you can email me and I will put you probably know my email because I sent you earlier today. So email me, I will try to do it, right? But bear with me because we have many people and I'm just struggling with the Zoom. Okay, so I'm opening breakouts right now. Okay, so let me see. Please go to those breakouts, right? So, and okay,